Hi everyone, it's Katrina. From ancient prehistoric settlements to lost ships from World War II, here are 9 of the most incredible recent archaeological discoveries found underwater. Number 9. Atlit. Atlit is a tiny town right on the coast of Israel. However, off the coast, you'll find something remarkable, the remnants of a village from the end of the Stone Age known as Atlit Yam. Although nature has pretty much taken back the town, the stone structures of Atlit Yam remain well preserved under the calm waters. Scientists have dated the existence of the town to some point between 6,900 to 6,300 BC, and it's a mere 40 feet under the water. Although it was only discovered in 1984, marine archaeologists have since uncovered a ton of incredible things from its ruins. They've found places where Neolithic peoples lived, as well as where they buried their dead. They've discovered over 60 skeletons at the site. From them, we have learned that they had a varied and healthy diet and lived relatively long, but they also had to deal with diseases such as tuberculosis and malaria. Turns out TB is 3,000 years older than we previously thought. But perhaps the most incredible find is directly in the middle of the village, where 7 giant megaliths form a circle around a freshwater spring. Researchers think that this was probably a place where the village's inhabitants conducted water-related rituals. It is one of the best preserved submerged prehistoric settlements in the world. At some point, however, Atlit Yam was forced under the sea. This probably happened after the Ice Age when glaciers melted and water levels rose once more. However, researchers think that life had long since left Atlit Yam before it sank. While they can't be sure, researchers have theorized that a tsunami spurred on by a volcanic eruption somewhere nearby caused the villagers to abandon their homes. Ancient humans were already dealing with drastic climate change and flooding waters. Number 8. Thonis-Heracleion. In the 1930s, a commander in the Royal Air Force was flying around the mouth of the Nile River in Egypt. From above, it was clear that there were ruins down there, so he went back with an Egyptian expert, and they found some artifacts. But they wouldn't have ever guessed that what they had found was just a drop of what would come to be the remains of 2 whole cities. Much later, researchers slowly realized that they had come across ancient cities lost to time. They had found Thonis-Heracleion and Canopus. These cities had been submerged for millennia, and there were only exceedingly vague comments in old texts that seemed to indicate that they'd ever existed at all. But people had certainly tried to find it for a while. But that's when Frank Gaudio and his team came into the picture in 2001. Gaudio was aware of the myth of Heraklion, but he and his team were actually searching for Napoleon's warships from 1798. As they dove, they found the base of a temple. At one point, there was a gigantic face peeking up from beyond the shadows in the water. The more they swam around, the more artifacts and evidence of structures they found. Heraklion was built around the 8th century BC and was a thriving metropolis. It eventually sunk into the sea and became legend. It was one of the most important ports in Egypt until it was conquered by Alexander the Great. The location of Thonis-Heracleion was over 4 miles off the coast, and there were naturally tons of goodies to find. For instance, the team found a bunch of ships, anchors, treasures, and a huge temple dedicated to Amun-Gereb. Protected by the silt of the Nile, many of the artifacts are almost perfectly preserved. Only about 5% has been excavated, and Gaudio says that it's about 3 times the size of Pompeii. There are many more exciting discoveries to come from this underwater city. Number 7. Testing underwater DNA. Sometimes, if you get a few advanced scientists together, they'll stumble upon a way to combine their research and discover truly wonderful things. That's exactly what happened with Brandon Foley and Maria Hansen, an oceanographer and geneticist. Foley was telling Hansen about the underwater vehicle that he'd used to look at an underwater shipwreck near the island of Chios in Greece. They had seen some cargo, but he was sad that they couldn't identify what it was. Maria asked if they had analyzed the DNA on the pots that they'd found. He said no, but then he thought that might be a good idea. And a good idea it was. Foley got bits of amphorae from the ship, which are a kind of ancient pot or jug used to carry cargo in ancient times, and gave them to Hansen. She did her DNA magic on the samples and was able to retrieve some of the genetic material on them for further analysis. This is astonishing given that the amphorae had been sitting at the bottom of the sea for some 2,400 years. This has made everyone rethink the possibilities of analyzing underwater genetic material. Everyone assumed that the sea was a lousy place to preserve DNA. They found some pretty interesting stuff on the pots. For one thing, they discovered little bits of oregano and olive on one amphora, which made them think that it was probably used to store those ingredients. It's not altogether clear how far the science can go for analyzing underwater DNA, but there is much more work to be done, and it has the possibility of opening up avenues previously thought impossible. They are now working on analyzing DNA from other collections to better understand ancient history preserved underwater. Number 6. Swedish Atlantis. Nowadays, it's rare for explorers to find artifacts from the Stone Age, but a recent discovery in the Baltic Sea from around 11,000 years ago has some people proclaiming that we've uncovered a Swedish Atlantis. Marine archaeologists discovered these remarkable artifacts underneath the waters in Hanö, a bay of the Baltic Sea just off the Swedish shoreline. Even though researchers had known that this area might house artifacts for years, they just recently went looking for themselves, and the expedition reportedly went very well. The divers who explored the area discovered a number of fascinating artifacts. For one thing, they found some tools which had been whittled from bones and wood. They also found flint tools, ropes, and even a harpoon made from bones. Under normal circumstances, these would have rotted away, but since they were hidden underwater for millennia, these artifacts have been incredibly well preserved. It's crazy to think that artifacts from 11,000 years ago could still be intact, isn't it? But it might still be too quick to label this as Atlantis per se. This isn't an entire town, for one thing. These are just tools that were discarded in a particular area, and it definitely doesn't match any description of Atlantis. But this discovery can help researchers understand how people in the Stone Age might have lived their lives. Plus, it might even be useful for climate scientists. By gathering information about tree rings and local sediments, scientists might be able to build a picture about what the environment looked like in Sweden after the Ice Age. Number 5. Batchdang River. In 1287 AD, China's Emperor Kublai Khan sent his naval forces into Vietnam. This included around 400 precious ships. It didn't go well. After the invasion attempt, the emperor got word back that all of these ships were trapped in the Vietnamese Batchdang River and systematically set ablaze and sunk. This was a terrible failure on the emperor's part. How could the Vietnamese have taken down such a monumental invasive power? Tran Hung Dao, the Vietnamese leader who orchestrated the counterattack, said the following: "When the enemy advances roaring like fire and wind, it is easy to overcome them." Sure, Tran, but how did you do it? Researchers recently looked into some texts from the period and discovered that the Vietnamese sharpened spears from trees and made a giant yard of stakes across the Batchdang River. Then, they lured the emperor's forces into the river as the tide shifted, making the stakes stick up and tracking the ships inside. Archaeologists haven't found any of the ships yet, but they have found some of the original stakes and rice paddies. Given that the mud and rice fields are great at preservation, they might just be able to find a ship within the next few years. Until then, we'll just have to marvel at the Vietnamese's miraculous feat in naval battle. Number 4. USS Lexington. This ship was discovered with the assistance of Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen. In February of 2018, after scouring the Coral Sea, which is about 500 miles off Australia's east coast, investigators finally found the remains of the USS Lexington. It was lost while fighting the Japanese Navy in the Battle of the Coral Sea that took place between the 4th and 8th of May, 1942. 216 sailors died during the attack, but 2,000 were rescued before it was scuttled by U.S. forces to prevent its secrets falling in the hands of the enemy. Those who took part in the battle over the 5 days had a major impact in the direction of the war, and it was a defining moment in halting Japanese progression across the Pacific. The wreck was found to be quite well preserved, with 11 of its aircraft still on board, and its discovery was praised by the head of the U.S. Pacific Command because of its historical significance. No attempts will be made to retrieve it, though, because the military considers it a war grave, so it will remain there as a mark of respect. Number 3. Thunder Bay. Did you know that the Great Lakes in North America is home to around 6,000 sunken ships? Thunder Bay, located in the northern part of Lake Huron, houses around 80 of them, which sank or were wrecked, only to remain underwater forever. Given the purity of the water, these ships are very well preserved and have even created a sort of reef. Because of this, Thunder Bay has been designated as a marine sanctuary and is protected by the government. There are a number of interesting stories to tell about the ships that sunk in Thunder Bay. Take, for instance, the Grecian. In 1906, while sailing through the bay, this ship started to sink in shallow waters. Its crew members tried to tow it back to Detroit in order to get it fixed. However, this didn't work that well. It just sank again. Rest assured, everyone made it out okay, but it must have been super demoralizing. Also, in 1854, two ships collided in the middle of the night. Apparently, the John J. Audubon and the Defiance weren't keeping their eyes peeled through the heavy fog that night. The former was holding iron and the latter corn, but they weren't able to deliver their goods. They sank after hitting one another. In fact, if you're an interested diver, you can swim through Thunder Bay yourself and see the remains of these two ships mere miles apart. There's even a cruise you can take that has a glass bottom so you can see them clearly without scuba diving. It's not just archaeologists that have over 200 years of maritime history to explore. Number 2. Lake Titicaca. Lake Titicaca is a big lake in the Andes Mountains, and it's renowned for its beauty, but it has more going for it than its good looks alone, besides its memorable name. In 2019, a group of marine archaeologists discovered that Lake Titicaca was holding a ton of mysterious artifacts underneath its waters. In particular, these researchers discovered that there were a bunch of sacrificial and ritualistic offerings deep inside of a reef in the lake. In terms of sacrifices, they found a number of animals, including the bones of a llama that had clearly been slaughtered as an offering. There were also a number of gold medallion artifacts. These offerings point to new facts about the Tiwanaku state, the people who inhabited the Andes from 500 to 900 AD. The Tiwanaku was one of the biggest populations in the area, and these artifacts indicate the kinds of beliefs that they likely held. Incredibly, these artifacts were also discovered almost completely intact. Along with the artifacts already mentioned, there were puma-shaped incense burners and golden ornaments. Given that Lake Titicaca is situated in the middle of the mountains, it's no surprise that these people would have chosen this location as a spot for rituals and religious ceremonies. Undoubtedly, these artifacts have provided researchers with an invaluable level of insight into these people's practices. Number 1. Battle of the Agari Islands. Even though modern naval ships are incredibly powerful, we shouldn't underestimate the naval abilities of our ancestors, as archaeologists searching around the coast of Sicily in 2013 discovered. When they looked underwater, they discovered a ton of mysterious maritime artifacts. However, the astonishing fact is that when they dated these artifacts, they found that they were around 2,000 years old. That makes these the first artifacts from a naval battle ever. But where did these artifacts come from? Researchers traced them back to the Battle of the Agari Islands in 241 BC, which was the final fight in the Punic War between the Romans and the Carthaginians. The Punic War had been going on for 20 years by that point, during which the Romans had been trying to gain control over the Mediterranean Sea. They were outgunned because the Carthaginians had greater power in the water. But the Romans were able to trap them in and give them a surprise attack. This set the stage for the rest of Roman history. There were plenty of artifacts discovered in this find. For instance, take a look at this rusty helmet and this deteriorating battering ram. There were also a number of jugs and bottles discovered among the treasure. To date, this is the oldest naval battle that's ever been discovered almost completely intact. We have the emergence of more advanced underwater tech to thank for this discovery, and are very likely to find more things with it in the future. Thanks for watching! Do you scuba dive? Have you ever found anything cool while swimming underwater? Let us all know in the comments below. I would love to hear. Remember to subscribe and click that notification bell to stay updated on all of the newest videos. See you soon! Bye!